also want to extend my thanks to Giselle and Insha, the New York City Law Review, and all the student organizations involved in co-sponsoring tonight's event and discussion about 21st century detention, the potential for prison reform. And for a lot of people, the words prison and reform don't naturally go together. Prisons and incarceration seem to be so intrinsic to American criminal justice that for many of us, we really can't imagine any other way. The word prison, I took a random sample of people the other day and said, what does that conjure up for you when you hear the word prison? And trust me, the word reform didn't come to mind too quickly. But what it does, it's remarkable. It characterizes, it brings up for so many people immutable characteristics of penal colonies, of dungeons, of chain gangs, massive stone buildings with barbed wire, turrets filled with armed guards, searchlights, and meting out punishment by calculating time to be served under lock and key seems to define American criminal justice policy. And yet there is this fundamental paradox, and I think you'll hear bits and pieces of the paradox this evening. The paradox of a country that prides itself on being the beacon of individual rights and liberties, and yet imprisons more people than any other nation in the world. And by now you know the numbers, you'll hear the numbers. 2.3 million people are incarcerated in the United States. That's more than the entire population of a lot of countries, more than the entire population of 15 states, more than the entire population of most American cities. And yet, to put it in perhaps even more stark relief, the United States has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. And a closer examination of exactly who is incarcerated reveals a picture of staggering disparity. Our jails and prisons are filled overwhelmingly and disproportionately with the indigent, with poor people of color. But for present purposes, we want to get beyond the data, beyond the numbers, and think about what daily life is like for the 2.3 million. How do they live? How do they manage from day to day? And how are they treated as they are serving their time? And there is indeed, I want to emphasize, I think it's a great title, the potential for reform. There is indeed potential for reform, not primarily because of any enlightenment that we're experiencing, but in many ways because of the current fiscal crisis. The fact is, you can't lock up 2.3 million people without any economic impact. And states that have seen their corrections budgets skyrocket at the expense of their education and health budgets are now faced with the realization that that approach is unsustainable. And prisoners' rights advocates like those who are gracing us with their presence tonight are there trying to seize the moment. And as a result, you're hearing more and more, finally, about reforms ranging from community justice to prison abolition. So we are fortunate to have with us tonight 4 dedicated activists. They come at the issues in multifaceted ways, but focused on the needs of particular groups and in particular areas, such as immigration detention, transgender and gender nonconforming prisoners, and juvenile justice. And as we hear about their experiences and their insights, let me suggest or urge to all of you here that you look for areas of common interest, for lessons learned, for ways to collaborate. Some of you might have seen a recent article in the New York Times, it was just about a week ago, about immigration detention facilities right here in New York City. It detailed abominable conditions, lack of access to basic medical care, lack of access to attorneys, inability to be met by family and friends. And I couldn't help but think, as I read this, about the similar outrages inflicted upon the 2.3 million, for lack of a better word, domestic prisoners. Again, what lessons can be learned across different prisons and different prison populations? Our guests tonight will each speak for approximately 20 minutes, and then after they're all through, there'll be ample time for questions and answers from the panel. Your comments as well are greatly appreciated. By way of brief introductions, and I assure you if I had more time, I could go into great detail and spend most of the evening with longer and very well-deserved introductions. Our first speaker will be Murtagh-Monks. Karen is the Executive Director of Prisoners Legal Services in New York. She first joined PLS as a legal intern and since then has worked as a staff attorney, managing attorney, director of litigation, and deputy director for PLS before becoming the organization's executive director.